All right, well, we want to thank you all for being here. My name is Andy Pendoli. I'll be serving as our trusty workshop facilitator this evening. So joined here by part of the project, a number of project team members who are here to, a couple of whom are going to help present information here tonight, the latest developments on the project, and others who are here to kind of listen and learn from all of you, the community members, kind of reacting to and hearing your responses to some of the emerging design concepts that are being brought forward as part of the climate change and adaptation and resiliency measures. And Jenny, can you share a screen, please? You can start on the slides. And we've got a couple slides coming up here. I want to just first briefly orient you to the Zoom tools. I think many of you are probably familiar with these, but just to make sure as they relate to how we'll be interacting with you tonight. First, of course, is the chat feature, and we highly recommend any inputs, comments, questions that you submit into the chat box. That's very helpful for us because it lets kind of everybody provide input at once, but it also helps us to record comments as well, too. We're recording in a couple different ways tonight. As you saw, we are doing an audio and video recording, but typing into the chat helps us to record comments as well. And then on the next slide, Jenny, I think we've got also the raise hand function that you have as a tool. So if you'd like to speak over audio when we get to some of our discussion points, just simply use the raise hand function and I can call on you and have you unmute. So we've got kind of a blanket mute setting put in place right now just so we don't have any background interference noise. But we're going to spend the bulk of our time being able to open up and hear from all of you tonight overall. So. And then Jenny, on the next slide, we've got, so with that, let me give a little bit more specific introduction. We're here at our second workshop, our public meeting, to look at early conceptual design drafts for the different elements of this climate change and adaptation and resiliency measures to address coastal flooding. And we'll be getting to that a little bit more in detail. But before we get into that, let me introduce Doug Kraus with the city and just provide some kind of opening remarks here just to get us started and on behalf of the city. So Doug, you want to take a couple minutes?
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, thanks to anybody and everybody that's here tonight. This is an important project and really this project is almost all about getting community feedback. This is important for a lot of reasons, but one of the most unique things about this is probably one of the first times that Hermosa Beach, is really taking on climate change and sea level rise directly. And so these concepts you'll see tonight, are very preliminary, and some of them are, outside the box, but that's on purpose. It's an effort to show some of the challenges, but also some of the promise of these projects. And in many of these cases, you'll see, from the surface, you wouldn't even know it's addressing climate change, right? It looks like a typical capital improvement project, but that's the beauty of this is we can do some of these subtly, but some of them not so subtle. And so, again, feedback on the overall look, the feel, the context of these is what we're looking for, and we appreciate everybody's involvement. There will be other opportunities, and when this is all said and done, we're hoping to have some concepts, some designs that do incorporate the community's feedback, so that moving forward, when we try to turn these into realities, it's a much smoother run for us. And the idea of climate change and adaptation is already in people's heads. So with that, again, we look forward to all comments and feedback, and thank you.
All right, thanks, Doug. Good with that. And I think on our next slide here, we'll start to get into the presentation, and I'll introduce our presenters here in a moment. And first, I do want to emphasize before I introduce Jenny and Nathaniel, I do want to let you know we've structured the meeting so that we walk through some of the different design concepts at these 3 different sites, site 1, 2, and 3, which Jenny will describe in more detail in a moment. So we've designed a couple places that we'll pause to get reaction and discussion and commentary from you about some of these initial design concepts. So we'll do a little presenting, a little conversation with you, a little more presenting, and back and forth in that regard. But we've got a lot of interesting concepts, and let me offer one more perspective on the design concepts too, and Jenny and Nathaniel can also offer this. We're certainly not tonight asking to make decisions, or asking people to choose or vote on a specific concept that would be the design moving forward at a different site. These are concepts intended to explore different options and don't necessarily represent one or the other. A final design in the future could represent different components from different concepts for different sites. So we want to also emphasize that with you too, that this isn't just about a few options on the table that you get to pick one. It's really about looking at different aspects of each concept. So with that, though, let me turn it over to Jenny Zell. She's my colleague at MIG and leading our project team in this entire process. And Jenny will take it away, and she's going to be joined by Nathaniel in due course. They're going to kind of tag team the presentation. And then I'll come back on a few occasions that will spur the conversation with all of you. So with that, Jenny, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Andy. So as Doug just gave in the overview, really the focus of this project is to reduce those climate change impacts to this incredible natural and built resources here in Hermosa Beach and the public infrastructure that provides access to these resources. And we've got this terrific team of consultants. I'm Jenny with MIG. We've got, we also have Moffitt Nickel. I saw Chris on the call, Chris Webb. We've got CRC, Coastal Restoration Consultants. I saw Dave Hubbard on the call as well. So we've got a really great team to look at the various aspects of this project. And so just to give you a perspective on where we've been, where we're going, is we have looked at the, we basically have a constraints analysis, and that includes a hydrological study that's been provided by Moffitt Nickel. And that's essentially what are the areas that are at risk of flooding here in Hermosa Beach with different sea level rise options. And then we've also done a sea level rise technical report that models different scenarios and what those impacts might be and what's important for Hermosa Beach. And those items were presented at the first public meeting. I'm not pretty sure. I know that's on the city's website. If you want to go back and look, if you missed that, that's on our first public meeting. And in the meantime, we've been in conversations with stakeholders, local agencies, and city representatives, and many of you on the call. And so what we found in really our first is we got some good news here at Hermosa Beach. We've got this beautiful existing wide sandy beach, provides a lot of storm protection and great real estate for beach visits. And so today we're going to be presenting draft conceptual design. This is our second public workshop. And like actually both Doug and Andy said, that these are ideas and concepts. It's not already designed. And we are exploring in a very site-specific way what they'll look like. So if you see your house or if you see that patch of beach in the image, it's a visualization, and it's there to help you imagine and help us get your feedback on what these things might look like. And so just next steps, we're going to get your feedback today, and we'll keep getting feedback and having those conversations, and we will produce a final conceptual design. And that's this winter, is that refinement. But even at that point, it's a conceptual design. They're not like construction plans to go and get built. They're conceptual ideas to move forward based on city priorities. And so these are just a reiteration of the overarching goals for this project. It's a suite of green infrastructure, really, and sea level rise resiliency measures combined together to address some of those mobility enhancement along Hermosa and the Strand at those 3 different locations. And just as a reminder, we go south to north here. Site number 1 is here, 2 up here at 26th, and 3 up there at 35th. And so some of these risks and hazards associated with sea level rise and climate change for Hermosa Beach are, of course, flooding by rain, flooding caused by inundation, and flooding caused by seawater blocking storm drains. And flooding, we'll be getting into these, what you see here, a little bit in more detail, but just a quick overview. These measures flooding for rain event when the existing storm drain network is overflowed, different types of infiltration measures, curb openings, permeable paving lanes, permeable pavers, and also sidewalks with planters. Also urban greening, those trees do a lot of hard work in slowing stormwater and keeping us cool here. And flooding caused by inundation from seawater, that's the water that could come over that big, beautiful beach, and driven by storm events. Our approach, you'll see, we'll get into detail more, is for living shorelines and sand dunes that you see here, and some of our neighboring cities have that. And this third option is flooding caused by seawater blocking the storm drains. And Moffett-Nickel, later we can talk about this a little more, but it's going to take a technical solution. It might look, something like this. We don't know yet, but we're certainly looking at this type of flooding risk as well. And so the project is looking to combine those sea level and climate change risks with these other city priorities that we've got listed here that are in all, a lot of these different city documents. And so at the different sites, those mobility enhancements and flooding prevention, especially at site 1, which is Hermosa up to 4th, Hermosa Avenue from Hermosa up to 4th Street. That's this one. At 2nd, we'll get into a little more detail. Those are pedestrian safety, beach access, and also at site 3, beach access and some shoreline management solutions. And so some of those mobility, this is what they look like. We all know this in Hermosa Beach along Hermosa Avenue. There's some challenges. And there's also, this is taken from our first presentation, which shows some of that existing flood risk, even in existing conditions, but also the really extreme future, something I think it's a 1 in 200 chance of happening by 2100, which is that 6.7 feet of sea level rise here. So that's a real extreme case, and we've included it not to scare anybody, but just to, it's part of our study. What we're looking at is these different future possibilities. And also there are these nodes here. You can see the dots with existing nodes. These are typically like a storm drain outlet, which has some flooding now, different levels of flooding now and at different scenarios here. And so a couple of, there's options for addressing and increasing stormwater volume capacity in this area. This you see here, this is Hermosa. We rotated north to fit it in here, but this is Hermosa and up to 4th at this location here. And so what we're looking at in this image, and we'll show a bit of a blow up of this area, but this option here keeps the city infrastructure in place. This is an option where the curb to curb remains the same, the median, parking lot, street lights, all made the same. But by some sort of simple interventions with painting, restriping, you get some of those benefits the city's going for, including a potential you can see here of some biofiltration planters along here. You also get some, you could do some urban greening improvements along this way. But one of the big mobility and bike safety improvements is by losing a traffic lane, you can gain this, two-way bike lane connection from the south, Redondo, and possibly continue it. And so we'll be looking at that a little more. And I'm going to pass this now to my colleague, Nathaniel.
And Jenny described some of the stormwater interventions that we're looking at doing along this area. And one of those that she mentioned was bioretention planters. They can kind of come in 2 different styles. The image shown here represents an infiltrating bioretention, where water from the street runs into these vegetated areas and then is able to percolate down into the ground, and any excess water is still transferred to the storm drain system. But they can be located, like is shown here in the picture, next to the sidewalk, or they could also be located in the median. It does allow infiltration, so it reduces the total amount of stormwater that's going to the ocean. It also slows down that stormwater. The water that isn't infiltrated, it can still slow it down so that it takes some of the pressure off of the storm drain system to allow other areas that are upstream to drain more easily. And they clean stormwater runoff before it goes to the ocean or into the groundwater. And then lastly, another benefit of these is during extreme events, when everything is flooded, it does allow for faster drawdown of those floodwaters. So we're going to go to the next one, Jenny. So the other option is bioretention planters without infiltration, and they have the similar benefits of slowing down stormwater and cleaning stormwater runoff, but they don't have the same benefits of reducing the total stormwater volume. But they can be used in places where infiltration is not feasible.
And so this is what that section might look like in this first option. And this option here, of course, has a two-way bike lane. Where there's a red curb, essentially, where there's not a curb cut, not a driveway, rather, there are these options for these bioretention planters. This is at Second Street here. I think we've got a Turtleback Road. So this filtering, actually, there's a big catch basin here. So these would travel the water. This would capture water sequentially as it's flowing towards that capture. So, but it doesn't change much here. It's really striping, capturing a few areas for those improvements that Nathaniel just described. And importantly, it keeps that parallel parking here on either side of the median, and it reduces, I'm not sure if I just said this, but it reduces the traffic to one lane, both east and west here. And so another option, this is sort of taking it to a more extreme, or I don't know about extreme, but this has a lot more improvements here in this. This is option number 2, and this would reconfigure the curb to curb section. And it, again, it would allow for a two-way bike lane here on the west and continuation from Redondo. This has one lane. This reduces after Linden and First Street, essentially reduces the traffic lanes. It redoes the median, so you get this terrific opportunity for street trees integrated with site lighting and different areas here. It also allows for street tree improvements and sidewalk widening, both east and west, and opportunities for other inventions like permeable paving, and also capture and reuse under the street. Well, and Nathaniel will look at those a little bit more in this next slide. Nathaniel.
So here's a representation of permeable pavement. In the installation above, the street lanes are asphalt, and then the parking lanes are a permeable paver that allows water to filter through the pavement into the soil below. So as Jenny mentioned with option 2, since we're going to be redoing a lot of the parking areas, redoing the median, it's more economical if we're going to be doing repaving to be able to replace it with permeable pavement. So yeah, it's good for areas that are lower traffic, like parking lanes, and it does help to reduce the total amount of stormwater runoff. The next option here, which could be combined with permeable pavements. They could be located under the permeable pavement. They could actually be located under conventional pavements as well, but would be underground infiltration facilities. These are chambers under the ground that water is directed to them from the surface, either directly through permeable pavement or through, it's typically filtered like in a catch basin filter before it's put into here. And so it requires cleaning the runoff before it enters the storage to prevent sediment accumulation, but it also has a large storage volume and can reduce overall runoff volumes. The next option that's kind of in our toolbox here is capture and reuse. So this is similar to the underground infiltration facilities, except for instead of the water being directed into the ground, it's stored in tanks and then used for irrigation. So it can be used in places where infiltration is not feasible.
So this is a possibility of what that might look like in a section along here. Again, this is at 2nd Street. So what this provides is a widened sidewalk to 10 feet. Right now, this side is 7, let's see, the east is 7, the west is 8. I don't think I flipped that, but so it increases it to 10 feet to get a wider sidewalk, and also it allows for opportunities for these type of planters and urban greening on these edges where there are not curb cuts existing. And double bike lane going each way, and also a divider. It could be a protected divider, it could just be striping, but it helps to protect those bicyclists. So you get a lot of those mobility improvements in this section. This is reduced to one way, so southbound traffic is one, and this is a back-in parking like you have now on Gerondo Avenue. And again, and then this would be a new median, which these could be located, capture and reuse, different types of underground measures, permeable paving, and again, to the east, one lane of traffic again, and back in for parking. And the reason, so this may look confusing, but what this does, it really maximizes parking in the median here, because we looked at different options where we moved parking, even an angled parking next to driveways, but there's so many curb cuts and drive entrances here, it really reduces overall parking. And so that's where we landed on this configuration. And so this is where we're looking for your feedback and input, and I'll pass it to Andy. But in summary, here's a few of what we see as some of the benefits and maybe some of the challenges of each of these different options. And, you know, there's some great things about it, and there's some challenges, and there's certainly cost implications of the two options.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. I just wanted to appreciate that and kind of, again, remind for context here for everybody. Again, not asking to pick one over the other right now that you would suggest. That should be the design. But in a moment, I'm going to actually put up a poll, because we do actually want to get a sense of how much you may favor one option over the other, or different aspects of what you like about other. But then I want to open up, we can just have conversation and hear from you about details. And also the chat, by the way, too. Please do provide your comments, questions in the chat as well. That'll help us to make sure we're kind of collecting all your responses and ideas. So, but just to start things off, let me put up a poll here. So looking between option 1 and 2, you should be able to see it on screen. And those of you who are from the community, members of the public, our project team won't bother with the poll. But you know, do you kind of, where do you lean more? Do you favor one? Maybe favor one a little bit, but like some parts of 2? Don't know, really. Or the opposite, you lean more towards 2 versus 1. So take a minute here and just kind of register your thought for the moment based on what you know. What you think, which option we think might be best for this location. And then again, we'll open it up and have some discussion about what's appealing to you, what's of concern. Any questions, we can answer questions, the team can. So good, okay. A few of you weighed in, so let's just take a quick look here. Let me give you a 5-second warning, and then we'll open it up here. So good, okay. Let me go ahead and end it. I'll show you the results here real quick. Just about, the few of you who kind of weighed in, looks like a little more kind of interest or support for option 2, perhaps. But a few of you, yeah, a couple of folks have some interest in 1. So, and again, small numbers here. It's not a scientific poll. Just want to kind of take your temperature as it is. So, Joey, make sure you get screenshots of that. So now I just want to open it up and would love to hear from folks who want to speak over audio or, again, in the chat. Tell us your thoughts about why you kind of landed where you did, if you will. Why 1 versus 2, more 1, less of 2, wherever you may have landed. So if you'd like to share with us, yeah, Bob, let me go ahead and you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. I've got to admit, I find this a rather interesting discussion here. I wasn't sure what to expect in this particular meeting. Mm-hmm. I've been in Hermosa Beach now since before the turn of the century, which is kind of just fun to say that. And I've seen this big push for bike lanes everywhere. Now, the real issue I've got with what you guys are proposing, which of course I realize is going to fall on deaf ears because the mayor of the town and all the people in the council are proponents of bike lanes everywhere, is that as a tax-paying owner of a vehicle, and I don't see why our roads are going to be put on a diet here with lane removals for bicycles for 2 reasons. 1, this particular section of road, I believe, is speed limited at 25 miles an hour. 2, less than a block away is the Strand. And bicycles predominantly ride the Strand. They don't ride that road. And they're not likely going to ride that road in any significant volume because people riding their bikes like to ride along the beach. So to remove 2 traffic lanes that us tax-paying car owners pay for to create significantly more congestion, because that's what removing those lanes will accomplish, is just ridiculous. I can only say it's utterly ridiculous. Okay. That said, other aspects of this proposal certainly are pleasant to see. Mm-hmm. The idea of catchment, permeable pavement and catchment of stormwater, that seems like a good idea. Okay. But a couple of things, again, cost versus benefit. Permeable pavement, by the way, you mentioned in the parking areas, there's been permeable asphalt out for decades. The entire street can be resurfaced in permeable asphalt, and you'll get a lot more water filtration than just doing it in the parking areas. Okay. You'll also improve drivability because you won't have puddling of water in the street. The parking that's being proposed in the center in option 2, I don't know who the genius was that comes up with this reverse in parking thing, but to have reverse in parking and only 1 lane is like, it's chaos. Okay. It's utter chaos. At least if you're going to do angled parking in the middle, do it in the same direction as traffic. Okay. People can just hang a left and go into a parking space. Great. And when they need to get out, sure, they have to back into traffic, but if you don't take the other lane away, then cars coming can get out of the way. Great. You don't create a traffic jam. But I am utterly against this idea of taking 2 traffic lanes away for bike lanes that are redundant, totally redundant with the Strand. Okay, thank you, Bob. Which is a block away.
Understood. Yeah, no, understood. And these concepts that we're exploring, you know, early high level concepts, anything that might move forward out of this study would certainly require traffic analysis as well. So to be sure, Bob, so appreciate your concern about congestion and all those considerations about parking configuration, lane loss reduction, whatever that configuration would need some closer analysis and quantification as well to look at impacts.
A couple of other notes I'd like to make with regards to bikes.
Quickly, please, so I can go to Craig. He's been waiting.
I know, we'll go to Craig in a second because, you know, Craig is going to give us the surf rider view of things, which is opposite of mine. So you'll have a good counterpoint. Roads that are speed limited at 25 to 30 miles an hour can easily be shared with bikes, most of which, by the way, today are electrically assisted and doing at least 20 to 30 miles an hour anyway. So there should be sharrows in the road as it is. Redondo Beach's approach to bike lanes just over there on Harbor Drive is an abject case of chaos. It's sharrowed roads, dedicated bike lanes, special traffic lights that most bikers ignore because most bikes don't abide by traffic signals or traffic signs. They just bike away anyway. So, you know, I don't want to see the same chaos that Redondo Beach created a little further down the road, created in Hermosa Beach. Understood. All right. There's no reason for bikes not being able to share a traffic lane that's sharrowed, that's speed limited for 25 to 30 miles an hour.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Clearly, hearing your concerns about you know, opening up more bike capacity at the loss of full lane capacity and design concepts that you have some concerns about. So we appreciate you sharing that and thank you for that. Any other additional details about design, welcome. Please also include in the chat as well, not just you, Bob, of course, everybody, you know, find details about design, things that you like and don't like, certainly. So Craig, thanks for waiting. Go ahead. What are some of your thoughts here about these options? What's resonating with you? Where do you have concerns?
Sure. And Bob, I'm speaking for myself, not Surf Rider, so I appreciate your opinion. But I would just make 2 points. I favor option 2. I really do prefer bicycle lanes separate from pedestrians. I broke my collarbone at 2nd Street in the Strand riding my bicycle when a pedestrian jumped out in front of me and I couldn't avoid him fast enough. And also I am in big favor of sidewalks that enhance accessibility, especially for someone in a wheelchair. And those 2 features alone really appeal to me. And the back-end parking, I'm sorry, that's just a matter of getting used to. It's proven to be much safer than the other way around. And so I think that's, you know, just getting used to it. But I really think there are some advantages with option 2 that are appealing to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. And appreciate everybody's acknowledgement of differing opinions and respecting those. Appreciate and want to encourage everybody. You know, I appreciate what my neighbor said, but I have a different view. We welcome that. Appreciate all of you offering that. Well, let's go ahead. If anyone has additional thoughts about these options, please go ahead and share those in the chat with everybody so we can hear more thoughts about that from you. But in the interest in time, I want to come back to Jenny and Nathaniel, and we're going to move on to site number 2 and look at a couple of those concepts and start to get some additional thoughts from you on those. So Jenny, we'll hand it back to you.
Perfect. Okay. So now moving back to, or rather moving north along Hermosa Avenue to our second site. This is at Greenwich and 26 essentially. It's that intersection here. And this is higher in elevation, what our studies found, of course, and observation. So there's a little bit less flooding caused by the regular storm, by a rain event. However, there is some flooding that happens at some of these locations through the existing storm drain system. And really what we're looking at here is solving some of these big challenges that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Pedestrian conflicts that look like this, accessibility challenges that look like this. And so Do you want to take this one, Nathaniel?
Yeah, so another option that we'll have as we look at the options for this area would be bioretention basins, which are very similar to bioretention planters, except for kind of as this illustration shows, rather than having vertical sides, it allows for more slip sides, which can be more contextual to areas that aren't as like highly trafficked. So they tend to be more cost effective as well, but essentially provide the same benefits as the bioretention planters that are doing infiltration. So now starting to look at some of the options for this area to improve traffic flow, as well as integrate some of these stormwater interventions that we've talked about. First of all, it's a big move here to look at doing a traffic circle. And one thing that's going to be common between all three of the options that we're showing for this area is that it does involve northbound traffic merging from 2 lanes to 1 lane, which right now, if you can picture the aerial that Jenny showed earlier, where there's currently 1 lane that goes up Greenwich and then 1 lane that continues straight along Hermosa, merges those to make the traffic flow through the intersection more smooth. The other thing that's common between all three of these alternatives is that it would allow space on the west side of the street there to continue the 2-way cycle track that's existing north and south of here. So it kind of connects those two pieces. With the traffic circle option, it would be yield sign controlled. If you're familiar with other traffic circle installations, they don't have stop signs or stop lights. You yield to the person that's already in the traffic circle. This option does provide the most opportunity for people and vehicles, the most choices in terms of turning. Actually, quite a bit more choice than existing condition, where, you know, in this case, it would actually be feasible to make a U-turn on Hermosa. And then we've kind of indicated here on the screen using similar colors to the previous site, locations where permeable pavement could be used, kind of dark green areas indicating locations where we could use bioretention basins or bioretention planters. So that is an overview of option 1 here. Let me put option 2. Would be to really try and condense this intersection as much as possible, because of all the way that 26 comes in with Greenwich. It does end up being a very large intersection, so it probably would need to be signal controlled, which is certainly a change from what is there right now. But again, there's opportunities here, maybe to extend the parking a little bit as it approaches the intersection, to add permeable pavements, and then there's also a little bit of space to be able to do some bioretention planters or basins as well. When you go to the third option, Jenny.
Sure.
And this third option really emphasizes the connection from the south side of Hermosa to Greenwich, which is the main thoroughfare. And then Hermosa from the north tees into it. And this could probably, it would need a traffic study, but could probably be controlled by stop signs like the existing condition is. It does have opportunities here to create sort of a green space on the west side of the road that could potentially be programmed as a parklet or something similar. But one other thing that kind of forgot to mention at the beginning of this, but was interesting when we did look at the traffic study for this area that was recently done. The major users of this intersection, even during peak hours, were cyclists, which was kind of surprising and really was a key driver for us looking at connecting that cycle track there. When you go to the summary slide.
Sure.
And so just to remind you, option 1 is a roundabout option. We've kind of listed out like what are the sort of changes between each of the 3 options. So option 1 is a roundabout. Option 2 is the condensed intersection. And then option 3 is the T intersection that connects Hermosa to the south to Greenwich.
Right, Denny and Nathaniel, thank you so much for the summary there. So we want to, kind of similar to the first site, we want to do, I'm going to put up a quick poll here. And again, want to stress, we're not taking it as statistics sampling or voting for options at this point. It's really just to start to get a sense from those of you in attendance, what's kind of resonating with you with these options. And so let me go ahead and launch it right now. And what you're going to see actually is we ask you a question of each of the options, right? So basically, we look at these 3 options, how much do you kind of like versus dislike each option, because again, we're not making any sort of decision on choosing one over the other right now. It's really more of like, what are aspects of each option that are resonating with you, and if you are at the point of saying, gee, I think all 3 of them are great. Right now, I think they're all great options, then that's great to hear. Or if there's one that's clearly more favorable for you than the others, that's fine too. So it's certainly not in a zero-sum game situation at this point. It's really more of exploring and hearing about what's resonating. So I do want to stress though, on the poll, you should be able to scroll down a little bit. So again, there's 3 questions in this window. If you try that, there's a little scroll bar on the right side of that poll window. So I just want to make sure you all see that. So we'll give it another minute or so to make sure everybody's kind of trying that out. Make sure they're registering what you're liking or not liking right now, based on what you see. And again, I want to thank you. Great commentary in the chat here. Adding some details really helpful for us. Bob, for example, Bob noting option 3 and the specifics. That's really important feedback for us to hear, for us kind of tracking a part of our record here tonight. So. Want to encourage that. Scott, your references about the bike parking, for example, the demand for it, for example. Nadia making reference to the Natural Resource Agency work on sea level rise is great. Thank you for that. Bob, Dave, the reference about stop signs and the curb extension concerns, really good information we want to hear. So, okay, so let's see. A few of you have weighed in. I'll go ahead and, well, it looks like 1 or 2 of you are still weighing in. Let's call it a 10-second warning here. If you haven't kind of registered here, go ahead and give it a shot. Again, not holding anybody to any formal registering of support at this point. It's just based on what you've heard so far. What seems to be more or less favorable for you at this point. So, and then we'll open it up again and have some conversation from you, hear what your thoughts are. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. Let's take a quick look at the results here. So first on option 1, Jenny, do you mind also going back on the slide just so we have it? Yeah, again, option 1 with the big roundabout traffic circle. A few of you seem to be a little more favorability, at least from the few of you who weighed in. It's interesting. The second option, Jenny, can you put that back up on screen so we can see that? Jenny, oh, thank you. A little more on the dislike side. From those of you here, 4 of you saying strongly dislike. It's interesting. And then the third one, a little bit of mix here. So this is interesting. Some of you clearly dislike, a couple of you clearly dislike, a couple of you more on the favorable side. So interesting. We definitely want to hear from all of you. Let me see if we can, let's look at this in turn here. Let's talk about, again, in the chat, type away about any specifics on any option, but I'll stop the poll results here. Let me ask, in terms of at least anybody who wants to come over audio, Bob, can we start on option 1? Jenny, if you could put option 1 back on screen here. But maybe let's take each of these in turn, if you don't mind. Bob, can you start with, you should be able to unmute. Go ahead. What about option one is, what's appealing or not appealing for you on this one, Bob?
Well, the entire option is appealing simply because it simplifies what is a currently complex intersection, which I do drive on a fairly regular basis. I live up on Prospect, so I frequently go down to that area of the beach, you know, coming down what is Artesia Gould and then down to there. And the traffic circle, frankly, it's a perfect use of a traffic circle for a multi-way intersection like that. My comment about the design is the curb extension on the northbound lane as it transitions into the circle. What you thinking there? Because that's just bad design for a traffic circle. If you're going to create a curb extension, it really should be extended from the median so that you create a merge ramp into the traffic circle. As it is right now, you're blocking the natural merge ramp into the traffic circle. You're creating the worst scenario, which is a right angle broadside type scenario when you should never have that entering a traffic circle.
Got it.
In case you're curious, why I know a lot about this is, aside from me being an engineer, I've also lived in Europe for a very long time, where traffic circles are the norm.
Right,
both in the UK and elsewhere. And believe me when I say this, I've been around thousands of traffic circles in lots of different places.
Great.
They
Well,
are
and the good thing, just to well, back to
wonderful
a second,
safety device. There has been virtually, you know, in terms of pedestrian car incidents, traffic circles have as intersections go, in design, the world over, traffic circles have the fewest pedestrian car incidents than any other, you know, intersection, be it stop sign or traffic light controlled. Anyways, but I really do like what I'm seeing there. Again, the bike lane issue, because I see that you're necking down the whole street to one lane. The issue with the bike lanes, and I think you mentioned there's a fair amount of bike traffic that goes that way, is because of the goofy scenario with the Strand bike lanes at that location as it transitions to Manhattan Beach. I mean, people literally have to walk their bikes up and down stairs.
Right. Which we're going to get to, by the way.
You really need to deal with that before you take away 2 more lanes of traffic. And by the way, parking around there is a nightmare as it is. So anything that reduces parking in that area is going to be an even bigger problem.
Yep. Thank you, Bob. And I wanted to acknowledge too, backing your point about the median configuration issue there, by all means, please know these are not kind of proposed like any sort of final design. This is what the exact design dimensions would be. This is high level concept, but your point well taken, and we appreciate you.
It makes me nervous when I see things at this stage being designed, I presume, by professionals who are in the business, propose something like this because there's a glaring defect in it. And that sets off down the road of general opposition, you know, and the like. And it's not, you know, I really think you need to get it right from the get-go.
All right, thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Let's go to Craig. And Craig, your thoughts on option 1, and then we'll move into looking more closely at option 2 and getting feedback there. Craig?
Yes, thank you. I do favor this traffic circle. I lived for nearly 2 decades at 2668 The Strand, which is right there. And I am acutely aware of all the vehicle traffic. I think this is a smart way to do it. And yeah, some people have to get used to it. I have to agree with Bob. I'm not comfortable with the that one area entering from northbound. And also the bike traffic. I recall that bike traffic behind the garage where I was living for 2 decades was very heavy, just north of where that circle is. So yeah, that's an issue getting back down to the Strand. But again, I favor a separation. But this to me says that it'll keep traffic flowing, and that little short section of, was it Greenwich? That little short section can back up very quickly. And So if you can keep it flowing, I think that's a much more feasible option. And the more green I see here of infiltration areas, the happier I am, if personally and from Surfrider's perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Craig. Appreciate that. Let's go to option 2 briefly. And what are kind of thoughts about here? What, for those of you, I think many of you were on the negative side of this one, if I recall correctly, on our little poll. But please do weigh in. Again, chat is fine. You know, what are specific aspects of this? Again, those of you who like some things about it, we want to hear that too. Again, it doesn't have to be zero sum. If there's some design aspects that are appealing, great to hear. There are many that are not. We want to hear that too. So, Bob, let me come to you. Did you, you may have left your hand up, or did you want to comment on?
No, I definitely would like to comment.
Yeah, good.
So the concept of putting a traffic light in a largely residential area like this for this multi-way intersection, first of all, the light itself is going to be complex. It's going to induce long delays, which will induce congestion. There is a short stretch of road to another stop sign just up Gould. I don't know what it's called there, Gould, or the street that sort of heads up, that little section there that heads up to the north from that location. If you go to your left, little, no, not that one.
This diagonal one there,
yeah, that one. Okay, you're pointing at it. I don't know what the name of that little segment is, but the bottom line is you're going to create congestion along that segment. It's already a problem at the stop sign above because clearly people get confused and congestion builds right there. I think traffic lights, the last thing you want to do in this particular area. It's going to create needless visual pollution for starters. You know, people who live in that area are going to have that light on all the time. And you're going to have a lot of, you know, stop and go, people revving their engines, whatever. It's not going to be pleasant.
Okay.
And it's going to be complex and lengthy because of the intersection's just got too many ways in it. So how many ways is this light going to work? It will induce a lot of delay.
Okay, great. Craig, thoughts on this too? And others too. I appreciate it. Craig and Bob, first of all, for weighing in with a lot of great detail and insight. Totally appreciate it. Want to continue to hear from both of you, but others who are here too, feel free to weigh in if you'd like to speak over audio. But again, want to acknowledge the chat. But go ahead, Craig, you should be able to unmute. What are your thoughts on this design?
Yeah, just from having lived there for so long, I am strongly against the traffic signal there. I won't go into a lot of details, but it just doesn't seem feasible in the location. And yeah, that doesn't feel like a neighborhood kind of feature. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you, appreciate that. Good, let's go to the third option briefly. Quick reactions, and let me ask folks, just I do want to move on to the next site. We got a fair bit to show. Bob was mentioning the stairs at our third site. We've got some concepts to share with you there, but Craig, I think I'm not sure if we took the hands down and went back up, but let me come back to Bob. Go ahead. Did you want to weigh in briefly on quick things on this one, Bob?
Yeah, this one is interesting from a standpoint of, I'm presuming there won't be any stop signs on the throughway, and that only the entry street, again, I'm not sure what the name of that is. Is that Hermosa there? Or Hermosa Avenue, sorry? Is it to the left? Keep going to that's Hermosa Avenue. What is that street there? You were just pointing at it.
Jenny, can you come on?
It's more Hermosa. You're talking about this guy here?
Yeah, that little segment there. So I'm presuming that street would have a stop sign entering in, and that the predominant flow of traffic would be on Hermosa Avenue as it curves around and goes uphill. You know, not bad. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it does simplify it versus what it is today, which is ridiculous what it is today. And I think it actually creates a fair amount of green area. That's nice. It separates bicycles significantly from the traffic flow, and it gives pedestrians good crossing options. So it's not a bad idea, but my guess is somebody will come up with the idea of sticking stop signs in the ground on the main boulevard, and then you're back to what you got today, which is a 5-way intersection with everybody looking at each other, trying to figure out who goes next.
So if you're going to do something like this, keep it a true throughway for the from Hermosa up to Greenwich. So thank you for that. Yeah, Craig, go ahead. What are your quick thoughts on this? And then we'll move on to our third site.
Yeah, very quickly, there already is a stop sign on southbound Hermosa Avenue. And but I like this because it makes it less of a raceway, so to speak. And again, I really like the green areas there and potential infiltration projects. And that's, but I do like this better than the other option with the light. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for that. And again, for those who weighed in on the chat too, and I see more details from Bob in the chat. Scott, thank you very much. Good. Let's move on. Jenny, Nathaniel, we've got a fair bit more to cover here in our third site. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Part of my job too, everybody, is make sure we wrap up on time. So I think we're pacing pretty well, but yeah, want to make sure we keep moving things forward. So Jenny, let's come back to you, please.
Sure. And I'm just noting too, I'm keeping a little eye on the chat too for bike parking. I think that's a great consideration, and we do provide some of these options. Do certainly further design would include bike parking for that area. Okay, next. This is what you were talking about, Bob, and we've all been talking about for probably some of you for decades, I hear, maybe Craig, which is the connection from Manhattan Beach to Hermosa along here. And I was, been observing the bike carrying and some of those challenges that are happening. And so again, just as a reminder, what we're looking at is how do we combine these kind of pedestrian safety type improvements with these sea level rise challenges and climate change adaptations, and help to mitigate some of that localized flooding that's currently happening here. And what we're looking at here combines some of that flooding. There are nodes that do experience flooding now, minor kind of localized flooding. There is some also pooling of water at this outfall. This is the city outfall here. We also have, you can't see in this image, the county outfall. We have a couple of challenges here with sand migrating onto the bike path, creating safety hazards. We have some challenges with beach narrowing and different sea level rise scenarios. And certainly we all know about these access constraints here. Oops. Oh, there we go. And so what we come up with is just a couple of options that look at what it might look like. And again, I'm reminding you, this could be your house or where you go to the beach. This is an idea and a way of thinking through these options. And what this one is showing here, option one is kind of like I would call it a mobility hub. And it really has these visual clues to slow down, look for your neighbor, look for each other in the paving patterns. It helps to clarify circulation here between pedestrians, who we all hope, and the goal is to head up north here to clarify this connection here. This option would, you can see here on the right, a stair. We're proposing that stair, and this option to be rebuilt and integrated, not with a ramp, but a sloped walkway to get different people with different abilities up, and so that they can enjoy this wonderful beach access here. And this option as well includes a special crossing. Just really draw attention to where you need to go. Watch out, there's some intersections of pedestrians, bikes, and in this zone, and reinvents this little mini plaza that's located here, gives space to stop and rest, meet friends, and meander down through this a little bit more plaza-like. And this also provides notably a bicycle rest area here where you could stop, get some water, and just transition from this singular bike way into this combined shared use path here along the strand. And notice too, we're integrating sand dunes and living shoreline, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Here, we're focusing on these different options for these pedestrian and bicycle connections. This is another way to think about what could happen here. And here we could preserve the stairway that's existing possibly, and then integrate a sloped walkway that kind of meanders through a dune. And this dune could provide, it's terrific in that it can trap sand and help to prevent the migration here of sand onto the bikeway in a natural way. Also rethinks this pedestrian plaza located here, and additional, there's a bicycle rest area here, and it could be different materials to give a different, maybe a more naturalistic feel to this one here for option 2. Andy, I'm not sure where we landed. Do we want to stop here and talk about it or keep going?
No, please, yeah, please keep going. Let's
Okay.
look at the other option.
Sure. And
Or I apologize. You have renderings of you have other renderings to show of those two
Yeah.
sites though, right? Yeah, if we can, maybe, can we look at those 2 renderings quickly? And then we'll do a little,
Sure.
we'll hear from the group.
okay, so we have these are those same options we were just looking at. This is option 1. It's more like a mobility, a little more plaza-like in its feel, rebuilds the stairs, separates it so the ramp is integrated to the stairway, has paving markings, possible repaving in this area. And you start to see some of these sand dunes here on the left. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. This is what it might look like heading south at dusk or close to dusk. And this for option 2, what this area might look like. And if you're wondering what that green box here, this is a lift station, sewer lift station we're keeping that there, but this is the really this place to stop and rest. That's what it might look like heading south again at night. And so we're gonna go up to this slide. And so what we're looking at again is the same site, and this image is indicating, and what we found in our hydrologic study is that there is some localized flooding and capacity with the existing storm drain system. And this is that existing city outfall here. And then the county outfall is what we see here. And in different scenarios of sea level rise, we begin to see some beach narrowing here. Again, these are pretty extreme at 6.7 feet of sea level rise. But what you're not seeing, and what our study did found, is during during a large storm event built on top of also of a high tide, that what you see here is this outfall. The city outfall almost acts as an inlet for water, and bringing that inundation into the strand and some of these private properties along here in a storm event. And so that's what is leading to some of these solutions that we're looking at now to help reduce flooding, also help reduce that migration of sand that's going onto the path. And so this is option 1. There are a couple of variations, but really this is the lightest touch sort of an option. This option would stop the grooming of the sand and seed it, and possibly add some symbolic fencing. That's fencing just to keep people out from trampling that area, and certainly provide areas of access for both emergency vehicles and pedestrian to move through these areas. And really the beauty of this one is it uses vegetation to move the crest of the beach where you want it, and help to grow this sort of a habitat space. And different variations are here. You can read them on the, well, maybe you can't, but there's variations on this options. You can install slat fencing, which helps to trap more sand, build those dunes quicker. You could pre-build these mounds. and seed them to really build that topography faster. And you could also build that dune with different ways of configurations of the slat sand fencing. And so this does provide habitat value and some protection from that sand migration, but what it doesn't do, it leaves the outfall in place, and it doesn't really provide flood protection in that storm event because this still leaves that outlet in place. And the next option would be to mechanically or pre-build a storm, pre-build a dune, mechanically build it and make that elevation. But the key to this one is also extending that outfall structure seaward to reduce that risk of flooding into the strand and the infrastructure in this area, and building sand dunes on top of this. It allows us to get just a larger footprint for sand dunes, but at the same time, showing options for moving through these dunes. And this is a third option, a third way would be to keep the outfall where it is. It's essentially about 17 feet from the wall here. And that's not a lot of area to get a lot of higher elevation. But one way to do that would be to have a cobble core with a cobble core structure with a vegetated top. And that could help to prevent flooding from the ocean in this scenario. And again, like similar to the other options, you can stop the grooming, seed it, add the fencing, and so that would be in addition to the cobble core. And the cobble core can also have a vegetated top on top of it. And so we're gonna come back to this slide here. I just want to look in perspective to remind you here in the option one. Certainly we're interested in the height of these sand dunes that are proposed. We're looking, this height is about a 2 to 3 feet add here in this location. That's starting to be what the character of it might look like. You can see the character of the dune on the right here. And this elevation is actually 9 feet higher than this elevation. So view blocking is certainly something we know is critical, and building those dunes up to that 2 to 3 feet height does not block views in this area as you move down towards the strand. During the day, that option too, and the nighttime. So let's go back to, let's start with those different living shoreline configurations here. And maybe get a little feedback. We don't have a poll. We don't have a poll, and there's not so many of us. So maybe it's just a discussion.
Yeah, Jenny, we have a poll on that.
Oh, we do. Okay.
So, and I appreciate, I'm seeing some, Jenny, while we're quickly doing this poll, so we'll just look at the dune options here first. We will come back to the two, stairway kind of ramp options in a moment too for everybody. So we'll work backwards. But let's start with these dunes. I'm going to launch the poll here. So you see the three options that Jenny just talked about. And I see there's some questions in the chat, Jenny, that in a minute, if you can please take a look at some of those. David, Scott had some questions there. But while you're taking a look at that, Jenny, I'll ask all our participants here. As you look at these dune options, kind of configurations so far, based on what you've heard, what's appealing? What seems to be of interest or of concern, or anything that you outright don't like based on anything you heard, and we'll open it up. And I wanted to acknowledge, for instance, I think David Gretham was kind of making the point that understanding the effectiveness or robustness of each option would be helpful to hear too, Jenny. That's what I was honing in on, that comment in particular. So in a moment, maybe if you can prepare to give some thoughts on that. And I appreciate that Chris Webb, by the way, is part of our project team. He's offered some response here to a couple of questions. So thank you, Chris, for that. Good. So for those of you on the poll here, again, we've got three. Want to get your response to all three. So make sure you can kind of scroll up and down on the poll there. Tell us what your thoughts are on each option. And again, it's not so much a matter of picking one over the other, but just kind of how does each one resonate with you? Kind of more or less favorable at this point. And okay, good. So I had a few of you kind of weigh in. I'll just go ahead and, yeah, let me give it about 30 more seconds. So call it the 30-second warning for those of you who still wanted to weigh in and register a couple thoughts. But then we'll open this up and kind of have some response to some questions and comments that you all have. So great. Let me go ahead and I'll go ahead and just end it here, and I'll share the results with you here. And again, just a few of you weighing in. So just interesting to see, kind of more neutral on the first for a few of you. A couple of you seem to like the first option. A few of you seem to like the second option a bit, somewhat, or strongly favor that. A little more mixed on the third option. So yeah, again, in the chat, feel free to give us more specifics about option one, what you did or didn't like, option two. That's helpful for us. But otherwise, I'll clear this off the screen here, and we'll come back to that because we are going to come back again to the stairway configuration and ramp. So yeah, Bob, go ahead. What are your thoughts here on the dune options? What were you responding to?
Well, could you put the first option up on the screen so we got, you know, the first slide of the first option? Actually, the dunes are a great idea, just on every option. The dunes are a great idea, you know, in terms of, you know, preventing the migration of sand, actually providing some visual improvement in that whole area, sheltering the outflow from, you know, from view. And overall, the concepts, you know, for the bike transition, I think are excellent. The triangular area in the middle with the stairway, I'm a little scratching my head between option one and option two. I thought in the original.
You mean on the ramp design, the ramp and stairway design?
Yeah, I'm scratching my head. I'm trying to figure out what the differences are between the first and the second one. When you had them on the screen,
Bob,
I saw
we'll come
more.
Back to.
Yeah,
Bob,
I saw more difference.
Yeah, we'll come back to those in a minute. And we're kind of working backwards. We're going to start, get everybody's input on the dune concepts.
Right.
And we're going to come back and talk about the two ramp and stairway configurations.
I think the bigger dunes are better. These smaller ones that you've got with all the crisscross, not so good. If you go to the other ones, which were, I think, a more significant dune, I don't know if you can just throw those on the screen. That, to me, right there, that looks great.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a really good setup right there. Plus, it provides some good protection in the event of a storm event for some of the homes that are in that area.
Right. Thank you. Okay, good. Good perspective on that. Good. Go ahead, Craig. Thoughts on the dune options? And then we'll come back to that.
I'm very much in favor of the dunes, and the bigger the better, in my opinion.
Okay.
To block the sand migration, if that assists with that, that's actually what contributed to me breaking my collarbone and sliding on sand. I also had an accident in Manhattan Beach where I knocked myself unconscious from slipping on sand on my bicycle. So I really favor this, but it's beautiful. And these dunes are really something that's missing and makes it feel a better nature influence on this. So I really like this. And that particular intersection of Manhattan and Hermosa is kind of a nightmare anyway. And that would soften it and help make it a little more friendly, I think, instead of this mad scramble to get from one city to the other. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. And while we're here, I want just wrap something. I just wanted to acknowledge there was the conversation among a few of you about the collection basin and outfall movement. And I wanted to ask, and Chris, I think you responded a little bit. And I wanted to just ask Chris or others, just based on some of that chat, discussion in the chat, any kind of further reaction or response about outfall movement and why you could or couldn't, or pros and cons, I guess I should say.
Yeah, there's some trade-offs between moving the outfall or leaving it where it is. Leaving it where it is keeps it off the beach, so it's out of the way of the use of the beach by people and also grooming. Lengthening the outfall puts it farther out into where people use the beach, so it becomes a conflict there, but it moves it farther from the boardwalk so there's not a swale in the beach that water could run up into if waves got really high in the distant future and when sea level rose and high tide combined with it. The other thing though, by putting it closer to the water, puts it in jeopardy in the future of actually being damaged directly by wave impact if waves were breaking closer to shore. And they do that. So farther back keeps it more protected. So there's just trade-offs to consider.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Scott, I see you jumping in here. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my question is really, unless you're raising the elevation of the invert, water's still going to get in, is it not?
Yes, water would be able to get in the pipe unless you fit it with some sort of
Backflow.
rubber kind of build type of structure that lets water out and doesn't let water in. And those are kind of common along the coastal area where these storm drains meet the water.
Okay, I wasn't understanding because it didn't seem like you were raising anything, and that's why I was confused.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're not raising. In fact, if it got longer, it would be lower.
It'd get lower, right? Exactly.
Right.
So, okay.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you all for Scott bringing it up, and Chris, and those of you in the chat who were kind of asking and talking about pros and cons. And again, where we are in this process, looking at design concepts, this is exactly what we get to explore, those kind of pro-con of these different configuration options. So really good. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Happy to take more. What I'm going to suggest, Jenny, let's go back to please the ramp and stairway configuration options. Jenny, can you take 30 seconds again to quickly show the plan view and then the couple renderings of each option? And then let's go, we'll do a quick poll and then open up conversation. So can you do that quickly, Jenny?
Yeah, I'm wondering though, one of David's questions was the effectiveness and robustness of each dune option.
Oh.
I don't know if that was answered.
Go ahead.
This challenge is it doesn't address flooding. It's more just the sand migration and habitat value that's provided. This is certainly the flood protection with, this is what Chris described as the different options for the flood protection.
Okay, thank you for.
Yep, okay, now I'm going back to these configurations.
Yeah, as Jenny's going back, David, we wanted to, she's keeping close eye on your chat comment question there, so thank you. So everybody, Jenny's gonna give us another quick 30-second reminder. Look at these two options, this plan view as we call it, look at the renderings, and then we'll do our little poll. You guys know the routine, and then we wanna open it up and hear from you. So go ahead, Jenny.
Option 1. Oh, and then someone was asking, what's the difference? This stair is reconfigured and it's integrated into the sloped walkway configuration, and it has different plaza-like features. That's this option. Excuse me. Option 2. I did see I think it was Scott noted, you're right, these stairs are in pretty bad shape, especially that little slope. There's like a 1 foot of slope here. So it can be either integrated or not, but it's sort of held out separate. And this just has a more quieter meandering feel, and it's separated from the stairway. So those are the main sort of programmatic differences between the two.
Okay.
And then we also had this sort of look and feel, excuse me, this look and feel variations here for option 1 again. This is where the stair and ramp are integrated, more plaza-like. This is again option 1. Option 2. And option 2 heading south.
Great. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll real quick. Again, just a way to take the temperature of the room. So we structured this question to basically kind of compare the two again, as opposed to weighing in on each of them. So again, where do you when you look at a spectrum between these two options, are you more strongly in favor of one over the other, or lean more towards one or the other? Are you smack dab in the middle? Neutral, don't know. So we'll leave this up here for about 30 seconds or 30 more seconds, and then we'll open up and hearing the commentary. Again, this tool, by the way, this polling tool, it's helpful just for us to just all of us to see, quickly, quick visual where people kind of interested. But I think the commentary, the discussion with you all afterwards is very valuable. So want to get to that briefly. So, okay, I'll go ahead and stop it here. Just 4 of you weighed in. I'll just show you just of the 4 people who weighed in, a little more favoring towards 1, looks like the first option. So, but let's hear from all of you. You know, those of you who want to weigh in. Bob, let's see. I think I got Bob here. Yeah, Bob, go ahead. What are your thoughts on these 2 options?
I think option 1 is a real winner. It's aesthetically pleasing. The idea of integrating the ramp with the stairs is really nice. I think obviously, you know, people who need access will use the ramp, but even if you're just walking down and enjoying the park, you can always step out onto the stairs and continue your way down. You're not trapped in the ramp, so to speak. In option 1, you've got multiple exit points from the ramp. In option 2, you're committed. Once you start going down the ramp, you're pretty well committed unless you want to start walking over vegetation or sand.
Got it.
So I just like the flexibility of it. Plus aesthetically, it just looks more pleasing. Option 1 just, it looks nice.
All right, thank you. Craig, what are your thoughts between 1 and 2?
I strongly favor option 1, and for a number of reasons. 1, it just looks better. 2, makes the north end accessible, which it totally is not now. And I've carried my bicycle up and down those stairs thousands of times, so I like the fact that you can ride through on this. But what's also appealing is it's kind of a little respite where people can sit and chill for a bit instead of the frenzied mixing between Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach right at the top of the stairs, where it's almost dangerous. You got to look both ways before you cross, and it gets backed up. But this feels really nice, and I think it adds a much more pleasing, higher quality of life element. And of course, that there's expense with that, but it's accessible. It looks nice, gives me a chance to chill, and I just think it's more user-friendly and much nicer. And sorry about talking too much.
No, no problem. We appreciate it. It's good to hear the detail. It's important for us. I mean, the poll, like I mentioned, the poll is nice to kind of see where people are, but these details are helpful. So thank you, and Bob and everybody over the chat who've weighed in. Appreciate it. And just for the sake of Jenny, I want to make sure, I want to check back with you. You know, I know both, I think I heard both Craig and Bob say, well, option 1 just looks nicer, it looks more pleasant. Do we, with option 2, I mean, I know it's one rendering, right? I mean, are there ways that option 2 could be more aesthetically enhanced, I suppose, in theory, compared to the way it's been rendered here? Just for the sake, do you know what I mean?
So it's not as colorful, it's just more subdued, a little more naturalistic. So
Okay.
I what I'm hearing is, and it's just a quieter solution, it's probably a little cheaper. And it's just a different option, but it would be more subdued, quieter, a little bit less obvious of a new plaza at that corner. So
Okay.
The rendering could be changed, but I think the rendering is describing kind of what the character of that's going for.
No, thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I thought it just occurred to me when I heard the commentary about the, one just looking nicer, knowing that, they're one rendering of each concept, right? So I just
Sure.
wanted to check back and just see, but I appreciate, Jenny, what you're saying, that you as always, you all, the design team, have very intentionality around, the tones, hues, colors in each, to connote that. So thank you for clarifying that. Good, excellent. Bob, did you want to, I saw your virtual hand still up. Did you have more to weigh in on, or are you good?
Yeah, just as a comment, because now that I'm seeing things a little bit better from the overhead views, I think between option 1 and 2, that green box, I think you said it was some sort of pump station or whatever.
Sewer lift, or yeah, pump, not sewer lift.
A lift station, pump station. Yeah, in option 1, you've got that nicely concealed in the vegetation, and you've got the bicycle rest area away from it. I'm pretty sure it makes noise, because if it's a lift station, it probably has a pump in it. So the noise itself would be shielded by the vegetation, which would be pleasant for anyone around it. And you've got more space in option 1 for the bicycle rest area as well. And per Craig's comments, currently with the situation with the stairs, it's made worse by the fact that people tend to congregate either on the stairs at the bottom or the top. and it just blocks traffic big time. Even people having to carry their bikes up and down the stairs are constantly like they're dealing with crowds of people at the top and the bottom. So this does mitigate that a lot.
Okay.
But not, option 2 to me is like, meh.
Okay.
Option 1, way better.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. David, please jump in here. What's resonating for you?
I was going to go back to the dunes after you finish this topic and are ready to move on.
Sure, let's go there right now. What did you want to highlight? And
I couldn't get my hand to figure out how to put my hand up. So.
No problem. No problem.
So part of this, just to remind you, I'm one of the Public Works Commissioners, and
yes, thank you.
Just looking at this in terms of technicals or even preferences, but sometimes I'm thinking, how will this ultimately be presented to the public, and how can we help them understand, and how can we help decision makers like the City Council understand? Mm-hmm. The dunes was kind of interesting, especially because I have really hardly any familiarity with this. So what I think I heard from some of the discussion was that there are trade-offs with the different options, and that different aspects of them may have strengths and weakness into terms of the types of things that they address. Yeah. And perhaps at some point when you communicate the pros and cons of the different options, you could sort of explain that to people. And I'll just say generically that, everybody, can walk or ride a bike or drive a car pretty much, but not a lot of people know as much about things like hydrology and outfalls and dunes and erosion and stuff. So that's an area where it might be helpful to, just because you all know so much, the general public does not.
Totally, David, really appreciate that. I know our team continues to try and challenge ourselves to be thoughtful about making sure we take out sometimes we call it the engineering ease or planner ease. And if you know that, to speak the technical terms, the jargony terms, and really make sure we break this down into, really explain these concepts and what these, different dune heights and intensity would mean. So thank you for sharing that. I think we can definitely continue to improve. And as this study continues to move forward, we'll be really thoughtful about, breaking those details down more closely. So thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate it. Good. And then David, was there anything else? Did you have more questions? I know you had mentioned earlier. Can we explain anything else about the dunes? And Jenny, can you bring the dunes up, please? He was talking about the dunes. David, was there anything else you wanted to ask while we have it here? I think you can unmute now, David. Go ahead.
I think David's not with us anymore. Or he doesn't know that he's.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay,
go ahead,
so I don't
David.
know. Sorry if I'm starting over. So
no problem.
The thing I didn't have any more technical questions, but what I was going to add is, and even if you go so far as to explain the pros and cons and
right,
if the types of things that the different features are good for, even then it seems like we're going to be looking to you to tell us what's most appropriate for our particular situation.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you.
Right here.
Yeah, when it comes to the dunes, I think, the hydrology and all the rest of it needs to be taken into account. There's some concern about extending that outflow, like leave that one up, that option 2. If the outflow were extended further it would be under the dunes for starters. It would be lower. And yes, it would impinge in the area of maybe where the beach might be used. But even today, guys, nobody sits in that area of the beach downstream of the existing outflow. Nobody wants to go near it for obvious reasons. It's disgusting. So I don't think, if anyone brings up an issue of, extending the outflow is going to impact beach access in that area, trust me. It's not. Anybody who argues for, I want to set up my chair right in front of the outflow area, they if anything should be staying away from it. It's polluted, and there's no getting around the fact that it's polluted.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, these are good insights here. And as much as the engineering hydrology studies, give us different perspectives, user experience is also valuable too. So yeah, we thank all of you for sharing those.
I'd say good job. I don't know how much of this presentation is left. I've actually got to go myself.
Yes, actually, and One quick thing thank you, Bob, for mentioning that. I want to share with all of you one quick thing, kind of separate from the PowerPoint. Our colleague Joey Nielsen's been working behind the scenes, taking notes on all your comments. What I'm showing you here now is kind of, it's like a digital whiteboard basically here. And you recognize some of these renderings we showed you, and Joey's been putting these kind of digital sticky notes down, and they're essentially the comments that you've all been offering over the audio and in the chat. So I just wanted to let you all know this is another way that we're recording your input here tonight, your comments, and you know, just kind of we found a good way to kind of capture the commentary. But again, as you know, we're also recording this overall, so we have it over audio and video. And but I want to just kind of briefly share this with you.
Just real quick before you, can you go back to the traffic circle there?
Yes.
I just want to see, I made a comment about the southbound side. You see the ramp coming out of the circle going south. You've got a curb extension there. Bad design. It's going to cause vehicles to swing unnaturally around it. You need to reverse that.
Got it.
You know, so that you can extend the curb from the median a little bit and reduce that curb extension to the west.
Great.
And then you'll have a better flow coming out of the circle.
Great, thank you.
Jenny, I don't know if that was mentioned in the stickies down there. I thought
I think you did, yeah. I want to thank Joey again for getting those details. So,
right.
Jenny, if you can take the screen share back on the slides, and let's bring it home. I am conscious of the time here. I want to thank you all for hanging in and staying so long. Jenny, I think we have some final slides before we wrap up. Can we move to those, please?
So I think we've actually covered them. We did a little back and forth, little dance between them. So as far as our slides, I think really the last thing that we wanted to go over are really what are our next steps. And so our next steps here are to take the feedback, go back to the drawing board in some of these cases, and work, you know, we've got a few more stakeholder groups to meet with and do some refinement with our consultant team to do some more refinements, and get ready to present this to the public and the draft conceptual design. And that is right now, probably November, and a public workshop, either late November, December. We want to get it before, sort of straddle the holidays there for that last public workshop. And, you know, tell your friends, hopefully they'll join and get interested and join some of these meetings. And then we're providing a cost benefit report, which is looking at the different cost comparisons for these options and what are those benefits. That'll speak also, I think, to what Bob is describing as, you know, how do you weigh preferences on these different options. And then a funding source report where a lot of these, what this is for, and as Doug mentioned earlier, is how do you go out and take this and get a grant or find other sources of funding, either state funding or regional funding that's outside just, you know, what the city has here, because we're talking about some big stuff. So, and those are the next steps that we have.
Great. Thank you. And I do want to mention and stress, because a couple of you mentioned in the chat, we do appreciate all informal word of mouth and sharing information about the project. I will put in the chat here momentarily. There is a project webpage dedicated to this project overall that you can continue to track and encourage your neighbors to, friends and neighbors to visit and learn more about the project. We'll be posting, of course, the video of today's workshop, and the first workshop we had is already up there. And I just put the link in the chat there. So encourage you to go visit that yourselves, encourage your family, neighbors, friends to visit as well. And to also sign up on the city's website for updates for sending that information out. And we'll ask the city's communications team to help us kind of be even more creative in spreading the word out for the next workshop as well. So I want to thank you all for those comments. So, and appreciate all the commentary as well. Seeing more in the chat about looking at lane configuration options, perhaps looking at consideration about not making changes to traffic lanes and thinking about other ways to accommodate bikes in that way. So point heard and taken. So with our just last few minutes, let me come to, let's see, Craig for last thoughts before we sign off. Go ahead. Let's see, Craig, where'd you go? Go ahead, Craig.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to put in a plug for the Safe Clean Water program for LA County. I'm actually the chair of the South Santa Monica Bay Watershed Area Steering Committee, and we need more public participation. If you go to safecleanwaterla.org, you can see the different watershed areas, and these infiltration projects are exactly the kind of projects we would like to see. There was funding for the project up in Manhattan Beach at Bruce's Beach, and these are great ideas, and I encourage the public to take a more active role in the Measure W meetings, and we have them right now once a month. They could go to twice, but I just wanted to put in the plug and strongly encourage participation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. Appreciate that and all your comments tonight too. And Bob, go ahead. What were your last thoughts before we sign
Yeah,
off tonight?
along the lines of this, the general proposal, I made my comments there with regards to bike lanes. I mean, I'd really like to see a proposal that does not reduce lanes on streets. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I think as a victim, and I call myself a victim of the Safer Prospect Project because I live at 15th and Prospect, where some silliness was done right across the street from my house. It was extremely frustrating to go through the community meetings like this, be presented with options, none of which were reasonable, and then be given a poll like, which one do you like? It's kind of like, they're all lousy. Give me one that I would, give me another alternative. That's option one. The other thing, I'm all for reducing pollution in the Bay. Now, let's make that clear. I don't want to see any pollution go out into the Bay. But at the same time, we need to take into account that maybe it rains 3 or 4 inches a year around here. And some trade-off needs to be given in terms of how money is spent to benefit the public at large, the common good. If we put way too much money into the capture part of the project, and then other parts, the surface parts that people are going to enjoy are limited because all the money was spent underground, that concerns me. I don't think we should go nuts with overspending for stormwater capture when we have virtually no stormwater to capture, and it's likely going to get worse in that regard. Less rain, that is, than better moving forward. So, but at the same time, hey, the green stuff, all the stuff that you're showing,
right,
would be nice. And incorporating stormwater capture there. I still want to emphasize pavements, any pavement that's laid in this at this time should always be permeable with built underground water capture systems like you're proposing. Too much asphalt is laid and it's totally sealed. Even today, they're redoing roads all over the place with this sealed asphalt. It is Stone Age technology, and I'm sure the people that you work with understand what I'm saying. There's no good reason for it. So you can incorporate all this wonderful water infiltration with much limited expense, much more limited expense, and still end up with a fine finished street.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate all the commentary tonight. A lot of good details and insights here, pros and cons on many of these options. So thank you. And thanks to everybody. So we'll look forward to staying in touch with you. Make sure you're signed up for email updates. And let me just check in with Doug. Doug, any last closing remarks for folks before we send them off for their evening?
No, thank you all again for being here. This is great. I can definitely see some important changes and a final result that's going to be good.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks to Jenny and Nathaniel for all their work here, Chris's support, and we have other team members who have been helping to keep things moving along. So thanks to them. We're going to go ahead and
hey, Andy, real quick before we go, Bob had a pretty important question. I think might be good if we address. For
I
everyone
apologize.
here.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for checking that out. I believe let's see. And Doug, I think you can help clarify. Doug, can we put your email address in the chat? Let's do that if you don't mind. I think
I can do that right now.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. So stand by, everybody. Yeah, thank you for Bob for the clarifying question, because you probably weren't the only one. So there you go. There's Doug's thank you, Doug, for that. There's Doug's email address. Stay in touch with Doug. We can work through Doug to make sure you got you received the notice. And we're going to continue to use the city's social media pages, looking at other community-based social media pages to try and, again, reach further out and draw more people in. So appreciate that. Yeah, thank you all for those ideas. All right, well, with that, we'll sign off and say thank you for being here tonight. Have a great evening. We'll look forward to having you at our next workshop, probably in December. So thanks. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Thank you all.